All right. Can we come to order if everyone will take their seats? And we're ready to begin. We're a little bit late in starting. One committee was solving all the problems and needed a couple of extra minutes. So welcome everyone. Today is February. What is today? February 9th. Thank you. 2023. We're in the Utah State Charter School Board meeting and we welcome everyone here. Particularly, I want to pay attention to we've had always generously the Utah State Board of Education has a liaison from that board to ours, and we have enjoyed the service of Matt Hymas and his comments always to our board as we've worked through, and we thanked him last time for the time he's been with us. And of course, they've reorganized a new year, and instead we like to welcome Joseph Carey to our board. And maybe when we get to the board report, I'll pause for a minute. If there's anything you'd like to tell us about yourself, you could be thinking instead of me just springing it on you right this second. So you have a little bit of time to think about that, but we welcome you, Member Carey, to our board and hope you enjoy your service here. We welcome you and are happy to have you. Thank you. Your input will be valuable to us, so thank you. We also want to note that sitting in today, we are really lucky. This is better than just pinch hitting. This is really, we're fortunate to have Brian Quisenberry with us from the AG's office to sit in and advise us as we need that. And note also, he spells his first name correctly. Just wanted to point that out. And so it's a good thing. And so from the two Brians around the table, we welcome you and are glad for you to be here anytime that we need it. So thank you so much. So welcome to everyone else as we're in this busy time of year, and we're going to hear a little bit about that as we get to our legislative report this afternoon. So we'll start first with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Vice Chair Phillips will lead us in that.
Please begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you so much. I want to make sure that I'm not leaving out items as we go along. It's always important. I always want to take just a second to pause and look at, just to remind us that our mission is advancing quality choice, just so we keep this front of mind as we start our meeting and making decisions. Advancing quality choice, innovation, and student success through rigorous authorizing and supportive oversight. Our vision is every student, each student, I always like to say every still seems collective to me in some ways. Each student, so each individual child has access to an excellent education that meets their unique learning needs, and that's what we're about. So individual families have choices and opportunities to select educational pathways that work best for their children. We do it with the values of excellence, trust, impact, authenticity, and compassion. So just so that our mission, vision, values are in front of our mind as we begin each meeting, just take a minute to do that quick reminder and overview. I know we know it, but it's good for us to think about it. And Member Bassett has a thought for us this morning. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. In Brene Brown's book, Braving the Wilderness, the author shares an interview with Dr. Michelle Buck on the topic of conflict. She writes, "People often silence themselves or agree to disagree without fully exploring the actual nature of the disagreement for the sake of protecting a relationship and maintaining connection. But when we avoid certain conversations, we never fully learn how the other person feels about all of the issues. We sometimes end up making assumptions that not only perpetuate, but deepen misunderstandings, and that can generate resentment. These results are sometimes worse for the relationship than just having the so-called argument would be. The key is to learn how to navigate conflicts or differences of opinion in a way that deepens mutual understanding, even if two people still disagree. Imagine that after a meaningful conversation, two people could actually have increased mutual understanding, greater mutual respect, and better connection, but still completely disagree. I value the thought, end quote. I value the thought that we can learn to navigate conflict in a way that improves a relationship. We must, as the book title implies, be brave enough to do so. I'll end with a short poem by Shel Silverstein. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. All the woulda, coulda, shouldas laying in the sun, talking about the things they woulda, coulda, shoulda done. But those woulda, coulda, shouldas all ran away and hid from one little did. That's my thought for the day.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, so important for all of us to remember, and I think it's a way that this board lives. We really like each other, but we often have very polar. We're polar in our thoughts, and we disagree often, but still in an atmosphere and a community of respect for each other. And what an appropriate thought for us today. Thank you so much, Member Bassett. I skipped a piece on the agenda, and I need to ask Ms. Castillo if we have any public comment today. Oh, no. So the sheet is blank. Thank you so much. So it was okay to skip. I'll go on then to board chair report. And I don't have a lot to report because other than know that this is a busy season, as we all know, in the legislative session, those 45 days become very busy and we're kind of at mid-course. And Member Phillips will talk about that this afternoon. But I just thought it was interesting to note, I was there last week, Wednesday all day, and on the board, when the House had floor time, the speaker said, I know some of you are frustrated, he said to the other representatives. I know some of you are frustrated that your bills are not coming out quickly. I've spoken to all the department heads, so those drafting attorneys and legislative fiscal analysts and all of the ledge research, all those folks who prepare the legislation to be considered based on what our various legislators hope to accomplish during the session. He said, I know you are frustrated that your bills aren't coming out. He said, but I want you to know they're working really hard because they have already drafted 50 more bills than they did for the entire session last year. So we have a very active, busy legislature this year as they're considering a lot of work. You just have to scan through the work that they're doing. And I know the Education Committee is meeting this morning. So we'll hear more about that as we go along. But I do want to take time from Member Carey to just introduce himself so we get to know him a little bit better. And as we go along, you'll get to know each of us as well.
I want you to know I actually asked for this committee assignment. This was not a punishment, that I went out and said, I want to serve on that committee. And I think the best thing I can do is share that there have been two women in my life that instilled in my heart the importance of education. And my mom is from North Korea. And when she was a child, she had to flee with her family. And she and my grandmother impressed upon me. They always used to say, you can skip a meal, but you can never skip class. Like school was something we just did. And she looked at it not only as an opportunity to maybe get the better job or, ascend your career, but she said education was essential in establishing a better person, that we're better people when we're educated. We are more tolerant, we're more accepting. And it was really important for her to do that. And my other role model in education was my third grade teacher, Mrs. Thomas. And my mom didn't look like the other moms. She didn't speak English. And kids can sometimes be very tough when your mom doesn't look and sound like the other moms. And it was really difficult for me. And a lot of problems in the classroom and out of the classroom. And Mrs. Thomas Today, I guess we would call it SEL, right? She took the time just to find out what was happening and really just make sure she understood why this child couldn't sit still and was always getting into trouble. And she changed my life because of that. And for the longest time, I used her last name in my online password. Since I started sharing this story, I have since changed. It's no longer Thomas, but uh, I don't have an education background. I'm an attorney and did media for a very long time. Um, but I just felt that we need to just to build more trust between all the stakeholders in education, and I felt that was not only lacking but getting worse. And so I'm a big advocate for communication. I'm a big advocate for disparate ideas. Let's hear all the ideas, and I believe the best ones will rise to the top. I am a strong advocate for charter schools. I have been going back and forth with our social media team, wanting to see our state board promote charter schools on the state board website and our social media. Didn't go over as easily as I thought it would. But that's where I stand because I believe that it's our obligation to get these students into the best environment for them. And I think the vast majority of students, that's the public school. But I think there are students that excel in different environments. I had the opportunity of going to the Utah Military Academy and watching those students stand at, I don't know if it was attention or parade rest, but watching them in complete silence for 20 minutes, that wouldn't work for everybody, but it works for those students. And they're finding that they're excelling at that. Um, so that's what I'm hoping to do is just increase those opportunities for as many students so they can find the right fit. Because if you're always looking over your shoulder, if you're being bullied, you cannot learn in that environment. So let's get these students into an environment where they're safe and they can excel. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for choosing us, and we appreciate you sharing so much of your background. Thank you so much. It's inspiring. I think many of us have a teacher or two who have inspired us in our lives, and thank you for sharing, Mrs. Thomas. And now we can't get into your email. But we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Yeah. And hope to get to know you better. So each of us will share as we go along. I'm sure you'll learn a lot about us. Let's move to Director Lambert and her director report, please.
Well, good morning, and again, let me offer my welcome as well. It was wonderful to hear your story, and why is this not connecting? Technology. I had it all set, ready to go, and it might. Can you? It's in the folder. Okay. Much.
Very welcome.
I'll kind of start. So last year we had our first annual celebration with some of our charter schools at the Bees game. And it was a great success, even for just the first time. And so we are doing a second one. So if you go ahead to the thank you. So here's the announcement that we're going to start sending out to our charter schools. We know that we pulled you to make sure that this was okay. It's the evening of our board meeting. So we'll probably have a late afternoon board meeting, depending upon what we have on the agenda. And then we'll go over and have dinner and a ball game with a few of our schools and celebrate with them. So we're really excited to be able to do this. And we are grateful to be able to work with the bees, and they're great to work with to be able to do this. So, the next slide is to talk about something that we've been invited to join in on. It is called the Indicators of Distress Collaborative, and it is done through WestEd and the National Charter Schools Institute. It is a 2-year grant that they've received to be able to work with a few authorizers to be able to identify some early indicators. So the goal is to be able to intervene into earlier. And so what we'll do is the first year we'll spend looking at different potential indicators of distress and seeing which are best to maybe predict of what could cause future problems. And then the second year is identifying different resources and things, interventions to be able to head off the distress. So this is just something that just barely started. We were just barely invited to join. I wasn't 100% sure if we were going to be invited because they were looking for smaller authorizers. But I think that we can also add a lot to it, being a larger authorizer, and the fact that we have such great access to data in working with collaboration with USBE. So go to the next slide. Want to celebrate a couple of things. Utah Arts Academy, as you may remember, they've been building a building, and they were only able to get into part of it when they first started. They are now fully finished, and so they're having their grand opening in, what is that, next week? I lose track of time, but it's on the 16th. Thursday, and they're going to have a ribbon cutting, and those are just some pictures from their building that they have done, and just want to congratulate them. And I am sure that they are very happy to be able to be in their full building. And then the last slide, I believe. So this is kind of on the opposite side of things. That was a new building. This is a school, one of our earliest schools, Freedom Preparatory Academy. They just had their 20th year celebration. And they had, you can see some students dancing. They had, I think, a comedian come. They were just able to celebrate and their 20 years of success. And I wanted to share a couple of facts that were shared at the event. So throughout their existence, there have been more than 1,300 employees who have worked for Freedom Preparatory Academy. There have been hundreds of thousands of volunteer hours by parents, grandparents, and community members. So this is definitely a community school. Now this, I really like the statistic, more than 24,000 students have attended Freedom Preparatory Academy. Their building square footage, so when they first began, it was 27,000 square feet, and it was a rented building. And now they have just shy of 400,000 square feet on nearly 30 acres of land and across 4 campuses. And as you may remember, one of those is also in St. George. So they're in Provo, the place that's right by Provo. Vineyard, sorry to anyone from Vineyard, and in St. George. And then Freedom, this is also quite cool, I think. Freedom Preparatory Academy, they have students and employees that come and go and live in many different countries. That includes Mexico, Canada, the Pacific Islands, Italy, Spain, Morocco, Central America, Brazil, Paraguay, a lot of South American countries, Russia, Ukraine, Mongolia, China, Egypt, Africa, and Australia. And in fact, they have some sort of connection to all but one of the continents in the world. So 6 of the 7 continents. I'm guessing that 7th is Antarctica because there's not much connection there. But it's just a joy to be able to celebrate with two different schools in two very different paths right now, you know, in their construction. But I just want to congratulate Freedom Preparatory Academy.
Absolutely. Congratulations to them, each of our schools, as they continue to think of that influence, not just on our own state economy, but the reach they have internationally as well, then to take that learning and use it around the world. Um, yeah, we forget sometimes the impact that schools and learning have. I was thinking that with elementary kids, when elementary kids say to me, "Well, I'm doing this so then I can be in high school. I can learn in high school." And I say to them, "Actually, what you're learning in first and second grade are the stuff you can use every day of your whole life. You're learning the good stuff right now. You're learning what you'll be using every single day of your life." Yeah. So just such a, and to have that foundation, such an important foundation to have. Um, let's look now at the consent calendar. I hope you've had a time to look at it. It includes minutes and the budget report, our annual report, amendments to some individual schools, and I'm looking for a motion.
I need some procedural help on this because I'd actually like to pull the minutes off of consent.
All right, so you can make a motion to approve everything except for the minutes, but to pull the minutes, we can approve everything else and then go back to the minutes if you choose. So you can make a motion to
I will make
pull
a
the minutes and
motion
approve
to
everything else.
approve all items on the consent calendar with the exception of the minutes.
And a second to that motion. Second, any discussion to that motion? All those, not seeing any, all those in favor of approving, the motion is all of the consent items and pulling the minutes for further discussion. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so all of that is approved. May I go back to you, Member Cisneros, to talk about the minutes then?
So one, thank you. And I love that the motions are outlined specifically and appreciate the work that goes into writing those minutes. So when I had some trouble finding the minutes initially and had to go to public notice website to find them. So I was delayed on reading them. But as I read through them, I would ask that some additional detail be added only because I found I had the problem. And so if it's just me, then I'll own it, which was the recommendations that we made in August weren't captured sufficiently for me to go back and use when I was making a determination in January. And went to staff and we tried to figure out what we had specifically asked the schools to do. And I found that same detail lacking in these minutes. And so I think it's hard for us to remember when these schools come back in August to say, hey, we asked you to do X when you come back with your new proposal. If it's not clearly, yeah, they can go back and listen to the entire meeting, but if it's not clearly articulated in the minutes, that would be difficult for us as decision makers, but also for the schools. So if we give directive to a school, I would appreciate if that's really clearly outlined in the minutes.
Thank
And
you.
it wasn't sufficient for me.
Yeah, thank you, Member Cisneros. That's a helpful comment. Vice Chair Phillips.
I just want to make note that I'll be abstaining from any vote on these particular minutes because although I have never missed a meeting until last January,
While
last
you were
month,
over Greenland.
while I was over Greenland on my way back to the US, I did not hear a single moment of our meeting and
Yeah.
have yet to listen to it on recording.
Of
So I
course.
will be abstaining from the vote.
That's fine, and that, of course, anyone has that option each time. Thank you, Vice Chair Phillips. Anyone, so the motion, can you make that into a motion, Member Cisneros, about perhaps maybe going back and adding that detail and considering those minutes again in a future meeting, or
I would like
however
to,
you'd like to
I'd
do
like to make a motion that we approve the minutes with additional detail capturing the specific instructions board members have given to applicants.
Would you like to see that additional detail before you approve those minutes? So I'm suggesting you might want to alter your motion to look at those minutes again in a subsequent meeting with that detail and make sure it includes sufficient
Yes,
detail.
I will change my motion. I will motion to ask staff to amend the minutes to add specific details of what we ask of applicants and then bring these minutes back in next month's meeting.
All right, thank you. Member Cisneros has made a motion that the minutes be amended to add additional detail relative to the recommendations that we made to schools so they have easy access to that through our minute process. Do I have a second to that motion? Second by Member Smith. Any discussion about that motion? So as I understand the motion that we've just requested that some additional, it's the minutes are complete, just not as complete as we would like them to be, so that schools and we can refer back to them with additional detail about what we'd requested. And so the motion is to add that additional detail, bring it back next month's meeting that we can look at it and then potentially approve it there. That's the motion I heard and seconded. If those who are sponsors of that agree, any discussion to that motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor of that motion as I just reiterated it, say aye. Aye. And any opposed? All right, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Castillo, for doing that for us. We appreciate you capturing all that. And sometimes we know our meetings are tangled and you have to do a lot of unraveling to get to that important information. But what a great idea to have all that in one place for us to refer to and for member schools as well. Thank you so much. All right, that takes care of our consent calendar. And we're ready to move on to, we're just a little behind, but I think we have plenty of time to catch up as we go along. And Dr. Evans is now going to give us an overview of the process. And this meeting is our annually. If there are individual schools that would like to apply for satellite locations, this is the time to do it. And Dr. Evans will talk to us about that process.
Thank you so much, Chair Bowles. And yes, this is the time for us to chat about satellite applications. Because of some of the things that have been happening the last couple of months, I'm going to refresh everybody on the board rule requirements, as well as kind of the process that we go through. I will talk about the applicant summary, so the last 5 years of data that we have about the applicant, and then we'll talk specifically about what this application includes. And then we also have members of our applicant school here, and they're going to answer any questions that you have. Board members, I have passed out a little handout that includes a section of the board rule that specifically addresses the satellite application process. It also includes some potential questions if you would like it. You're welcome to come up with your own, of course, but I just thought I'd be helpful. And then it also includes the third page is the financial history. And the reason I put that as a table in the handout is because I couldn't make it large enough on a slide deck to be really meaningful. So that's for you. We'll talk about, there is a slide specifically for this. And then on the last page are the metrics that the financial report is describing, and then also the targets that are supposed to be met there. So those are your handouts for that. The thing that I want to start out with is just the board rule. This process is currently in the administrative rules committee. It's being reviewed. And so our process originally laid out that we would do satellite applications in January with the rest of our new school applications and things like that. Because we anticipated that the rule might have been revised and completed before then, we postponed this meeting intentionally. So that's why we're talking about these today. The other element of this is that when we have our applications, we usually bring in readers, but because of the rigorous two-step process that satellite applications have to go through currently, we don't bring in any external readers on this one. So this is just done by staff and through the school meeting all of the requirements laid out in board rule. Some of the things that are included in this two-step process. So in order to even be considered as an applicant, the school has to show that they are in compliance with a number of different elements. This includes having school policies and different things to guarantee that the students are being served. The application has to show that it is consistent with its charter, that there's nothing that is contradicting either of those documents there. The next requirement is that all schools within the LEA are performing and are all schools operating under the charter are performing. That's the wording that it uses there. Our next requirement is that the school has maintained a net lease burden of less than 25%, that they are able to report revenues in excess of expenses. The LEA is also required to provide a market analysis as part of their application. And then there is an additional any other information that this state charter school board asks for. Now, once a school has hurdled or overcome that hurdle, they then get to be considered. So that's just the minimum standards to have their application looked at. Now we get to the part where this meeting is really what we're talking about. In order to be approved, the school has to show that they are meeting the terms of their charter agreement, that they have maintained for 3 years 80% enrollment, that they have either a wait list of 40%, or they can demonstrate a demand for their school and their model. They also have to show that they are academically and operationally successful. They have to be able to describe any plans for the new school to make sure that the educational elements are going to be meeting IDEA, the special needs, all of those different categories. They also have to prove that they have adequate administration that has the capacity to open this new school. The school also has to show that they are in compliance with federal and state law, that they're in good standing with their authorizer, and that they are financially viable. And this section is what I've included in your packets, just as a refresher of what the actual board rule states. So let's talk about our applicant today. This is Wallace Stegner Academy. Their first campus opened in Salt Lake City in 2016. Campus number 2 opened in 2021 in West Valley City. Both of those campuses are K-8s. And I really just appreciated this quote from their application that talks about their purpose is to serve the specific needs of students who are at risk of academic failure. And then, if you'll permit me, because I am in several degrees in English, this elderly gentleman has nothing to do with the school right now. Nobody here is that old. This is Wallace Stegner himself. And most people in Utah don't realize that Wallace Stegner is a son of Utah. He was born in Iowa, but he spent most of his life here. He is an award-winning author and environmental advocate. And so I love that. So thank you for letting me nerd out about our literary history as a state. Wallace Stegner's enrollment, let me talk about this. So when they first opened, so SY17, they had 810 students. In SY21, they opened, so their next campus, with 1,410 students. And as part of that expansion, their max authorized at the end of this year will go up to 1,610. They've maintained an enrollment trend of 95.5% over the last 7 years. Their retention rate is an average of 84.6, with their lowest being 82 and their highest being 88. Their lowest year of retention rate was actually in SY22 when they opened their new campus, which I think could possibly explain some of that drop, is that the students moved to that other campus. And same thing with their transfer rate. So their average is 9.96, with their lowest being 6.7 and their highest being 14. This is high, but it does meet our metric. It's within the what's allowable there. As far as their academic performance goes, I will point out what these tables show is the information from the data gateway. The information on the left is their Salt Lake campus. The information on the right of each box is the West Valley campus. And then if it only shows one data set, that's because they were both awarded the same thing. So for example, the achievement for ELA at their Salt Lake City campus is 36.4%, and their West Valley campus is 41.5%, and both schools received a typical rating. So that's how to interpret that for all of those. A couple of things that I want to point out. So the English learner progress for the EL students reaching proficiency is low, 3.1% for their Salt Lake City campus and 5.5% for their West Valley campus. The Salt Lake City campus was designated as critical needs, and the West Valley City campus was identified as developing. I compare that, and the reason this is on the bottom, with their growth table. Their growth is, they earned an exemplary rating. And I think this really speaks to what they mentioned in their application, that they are serving, and their purpose is to serve those students who are at the greatest need of dropping out. And so you can see that they are taking students that are academically very low, and they are achieving awesome things with their growth. It's still low, but that growth, I don't want to negate the exceptional growth that we're seeing at that school, right? 79.8% of their lowest 25 students are meeting the growth benchmarks there. This table is again another data point from the Utah Data Gateway. It shows the schools that are the most comparable to Wallace-Stegner, demographically speaking, and how they performed in English language, math, and science. I would like to point out that the only school that beats Wallace-Stegner is Wallace-Stegner West Valley. All of these schools up here are, of the 20 schools that are demographically similar, all of them are at least 88% similar, and the majority of those are over 90% similar in terms of student demographics. So I think we have a really good comparison group here, and I'm really proud to see Wallace-Stegner in both of those high spots. Their financials, and again, you have a handout with this. A couple of things that I wanted to just point out, just because they are outliers and unusual for this. When we received the application, when we conducted the review, it was using data from up through fiscal year 2021. Since the application was approved, or they met those minimum standards to be approved, we then got the FY22 data. And I want to talk about that because it's a little bit different here. The two things of note, oh, there we go. Sorry, it wasn't showing up on one of my screens. There's a really high annual cash flow, unusually high. This is potentially a question for you to talk with the school about. And then their change in net position has also decreased. And these are outliers here that we're glad to have them here so they can talk with us. The debt service coverage ratio, this is a new metric. The target is to be at least 1, and they are 0.96. So it's a little bit below where we want to see that. And then lastly, their total margin is minus 2.33 as of this year. Again, this is an unusual metric that we wouldn't typically have in the application process, because the applications would be reviewed and approved before we even got the FY22 data. And so that's why I'm including it here as a point for us to discuss. Now on to their actual application. Wallace-Stegner Academy TBD. We're not sure the exact name of it. It's proposed to be in either the Salt Lake or Granite School District area. So that's, yeah. I'll leave that there. This campus is proposed to be a K-12 campus. This is unusual in that the other two campuses are a K-8. I think the best example of this that we have from our past would be Excelsior Academy, where they were approved for a similar one, and they actually were given it was considered 2 campuses, a high school and then a lower school, or an elementary. Their enrollment for the new campus is proposed to start out at 600 students for SY25, and eventually by SY30 make it up to 1,290. This would bring the LEA's max authorized to 2910 for all their campuses at that point. At this point, I will invite Wallace-Stegner to come up and join us at the table and to answer any questions that the board might have for them.
Thank you for joining us up here so we have an opportunity to talk with you. Let me also thank Dr. Evans for going through the reminder of how we approve satellite schools, because just since my time on the board, which is shorter than a couple of others, that we have seen our process change more than once. and not our process, but those who control that process around us who have changed that process more than once. Help to remind me too, Dr. Evans, this is, sometimes there are things we can make decisions about and then there's an immediate approval or not. In some cases, we make a recommendation to the State Board of Education. Is this one of those items that we recommend? If we make an approval here, it has met all of the requirements
Correct.
to move forward.
Yep,
All
if you
right.
make an approval
So,
here.
we've seen it at least change in board rule. The numbers of satellites, I think a report is made at least to the state board because in a state board meeting, they change that there was a change to our process by rule. We've had in this last year legislative discussion about how we approve satellites. And again, as you indicated, right now we're again in rule discussion, largely prompted, I believe, because of that legislative discussion. And so though it may appear that we have complete control, we don't. Because we have control over the process as it stands today. And so we're going to do that. But thank you for reminding us because we've kind of worked with a changing or shifting parameters under which we have to work.
Chair Bowles, could I just add you mentioned something that reminded me, I wanted to give another point of clarification. So this year we received 4 applications for satellites. 2 of those had to be administratively denied because they didn't meet those minimum standards. The 3rd school decided to withdraw its application while we were doing the review process. And so this is the 4th, one of 4 that made it all the way through that.
Well, yeah, please, Director Lambert.
So I don't know if this was clear in Williams, but I know that you probably are looking for what staff's recommendation is. Staff would recommend that this be approved. We do find this is a high-performing school. As far as the minimum qualifications they do meet, those financial things, I think it would be good to discuss with the school, but many of those metrics are things that you want to look at in terms of trends and over years. A 1-year change doesn't make a school in a bad financial position. So staff would recommend this.
Yeah. I think that we'll see how as the board proceeds through it. May we start with, thank you for that background for us all. Thank you so much. May we start with, would each of you just introduce yourself so we don't say, hey, you to you as we go through it. And it also gets you in the minutes. As you heard, we are caring about those minutes.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having us here again. I'm Sarah Vaughan, the board chair, and first I'll just excuse 2 of our board members who couldn't be here because of previous work commitments, and that is Reid Farnsworth and Frank Magana, and both of them are general board members.
I'm Antonio Ferrano. I'm the board finance advisor.
Good morning. My name's Jeremy Scow, and I am the board secretary.
I'm Adam Gerlach, co-director.
And I'm Anthony Sudweeks, the other director.
Brad Taylor, contracted business manager of the school.
If it would be okay, I just have a quick thing I wanted to read to you guys. And most of you know us and have been around us for many years, but some of you haven't. I kind of just wanted to give you a kind of some background on how our school got started. 10 years ago, Adam and I were 6th grade teachers working at Glendale Middle School, just a few miles west of here. Glendale is an extremely low income school, and Adam and I had been recruited as part of a turnaround effort to fix this struggling school. We quickly built intervention systems to begin closing the knowledge and skills gaps that our students were experiencing, and those gaps were extensive. Just to give you a small sample of how bad things were, the average 6th grade student in our classes read at just a 3rd grade level, and a full 85% of them couldn't complete a simple division problem, which is something they should have learned in the 4th grade. 25% couldn't solve a subtraction problem if it required borrowing a 2nd grade skill. It didn't take long for our students to produce results. By the end of year 2, our classes were outperforming the state average in every tested subject. We were allowed to branch out. The next year, we had a team of 6 teachers participating in our interventions. At the end of that year, the results were impressive, with the majority of those 6 teachers beating the state average in every subject. And then the district got wind that we were, gasp, teaching 6th graders how to subtract, multiply, and divide. Those are not 6th grade standards, we were told. Despite the results, roadblock after roadblock began to appear before us. And before we knew it, the superintendent was in our classrooms to see what the fuss was about. Wisely, he told them to leave us alone. Unwisely, he didn't empower us to spread this successful strategy. So we threw up our hands and we started writing a charter. In 2016, our first school was approved by this board, and we spent the next year knocking on doors and standing in front of grocery stores. Our Salt Lake campus opened with 480 students, and since then, it has outperformed the average proficiency of the nearest 10 schools by double digits in every tested subject. Today, nearly 700 students attend that school. 2 years ago, we opened our second campus in West Valley in the middle of a pandemic. We had a break-even number of enrollment of 350 students. On the first day of school, we had over 500 students. This year, there are more than 600 students attending, and more than 700 have already completed registration for next year. We've had so much demand that we are, as we speak, building an extension of 10 classrooms onto that school. You might have already guessed, but the West Valley School in its first year outperformed the nearest 10 schools in every subject as well, despite the fact that it serves a greater percentage of low-income students than the average surrounding schools. How do we perform at this level? Teacher training with bi-weekly in-class coaching, obsessive data tracking, and probably most importantly, reteaching plans. We even write our own math curriculum in grades 2 through 8 because we couldn't find one that was good enough for our students. We're a college preparatory school, and we ask a lot from our students, and that brings me to today and our mission. Our goal is to prepare every student for a college education. We've heard nightmare stories for years about the experiences our students in West, East, Cypress, Kearns, and Hunter high schools. By the way, those high schools I just mentioned have an average math proficiency of just 18%. Our families have been asking for more, and they deserve better than this. A couple of weeks ago, we surveyed our families with 2 questions. 1, would you like to send your child to a WSA high school when they're old enough? And 2, what would a high school mean to your family? Within hours, we had over 300 responses. The verdict, over 97% of our families said that they would like to send their child to our high school. Also, we received hundreds of comments about what it would mean to them. I have a document here I can share with you guys later that has just some of those comments. Our students are willing and able to attend any college in the country. They just need a high school to see them to the gates. If approved, we will not only provide our families with a high school that they so desperately need and want, we'll also be building a K-8 school that will be the highest performing school in that area. And I'm not saying this just because I have high self-esteem. I'm saying this because we have the data to prove that our schools are filling a need in areas of our community that are simply not being served well by the schools currently available to them. Thank you so much for meeting with us today, and we're looking forward to your questions and thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for that statement. It kind of gives us a good overview from Wallace Stegner's perspective. So I'll turn to board members. Are there some of you who have some questions, things you'd like to talk about with these members of the school? Please.
Perhaps as a message or a question for Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor, it's great to see you again. Can you just explain the financial issues? I assume it's just as simple as acquiring a new building and dealing with the debt service related to that, but can you just address that for us?
Yeah, in fact, as business manager, it's weird to be up here. We're normally sitting in the back. I was told we could be up here. If I can't, I'll leave. I'm more than happy to be back there. But we prep the boards and we talk, and Mr. Ferrano is prepared. So I'm gonna let Tony answer that, because it's a good test to see if he remembers what we went through and what we go through on our monthly finance meetings. So I'll let Tony. I don't want to rob you of the opportunity, so you chime in, and then I'll fill in any blanks. How's that?
That's lovely. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and he is much more eloquent on these issues than I am. A couple of the things that he's pointed out to me that we're going to probably stand out was the deficit. We had a $283,000 deficit on the FASB method of accounting, and I'm just going to read this because he's put it down quite well. This includes $363,000 of depreciation and $309,000 of the bond issuance costs. So those are very unique situation that's not going to carry over into other years. The depreciation expense is a non-cash expense, and the bond issuance costs were built into the bond offering in June of 2022. So that was the deficit that you saw. And then I think, what was the other one that we really wanted to address? Oh, the days cash on hand. And that was just a matter of opening a second campus. Of course, your days cash on hand is going to drop down. And we also had a change in financial management at the time. And there was a lot that was sitting in receivables. And once they were able to address the receivables issue, our days cash on hand jumped up from 71 days right back up to 113 days by September of 2022, which was, higher than we even had way back in 2020. So that was just another function of opening a second school and having a change in financial management.
I think you get an A for that. Tony, good job.
All right.
It's interesting because my accounting nerdum likes to see, these reports that were up there. It's an $18 million increase in cash, yet a net position of negative 283,000. And as board member Olson asked, that's exactly it. So as we saw interest rates rising, they took on the endeavor of issuing a series of bonds that closed in the last 10 days of June. But their building was not eligible for purchase until August 1st. So under those circumstances, they were able to bond in FY22, but the purchase of the building did not occur till FY23. And it was a smart thing to do because I think between the time the school priced the bonds to when we closed, the feds had raised rates an additional, I want to say 125 basis points. So it was significant. So yeah, so the money was not only sitting there in restricted bond accounts at the end of the year, waiting for that transaction to happen. But then as Mr. Ferrano pointed out, of that negative $283,000 net position, over $900,000 was non-cash expenses, either in depreciation or in bond issuance costs that were part of that bond offering. The other one on that days cash on hand is, as was mentioned, days cash on hand it's one of these as we go around and talk to boards. It's not only a factor of your numerator, but your denominator. And when you open a new campus, that denominator grows. And obviously with two campuses, you have a lot more restricted funds that are outstanding at the end of the year as you try to turn receivables. So one of the things to look as we've gone through is by the end of September, having increased those receivables, cash hadn't really changed between FY21 and 22. It was actually down about $100,000 by September of this year of 22. It was over $3.5 million, and now it's at 3.7. And per our calculations, that's 118 days cash. So when you do it on FY20, it's about 104. It's now sitting at 118. I know that's hard mid-year because obviously what staff and the board has available are the actual audited financials, but you will see a large receivable there. So between the two fiscal years, which is amazing, 27 months, if we're going it, they increased their days cash on hand. They opened another campus, which also has a number of one-time expenses and outfitted the school. One thing with that series of bonds that we talked about and kind of goes to what Director Sudweeks talked about is it also included an additional $3+ million to add those 10 classrooms that are currently being constructed. So it lowered their occupancy costs on that. Obviously got rid of their property tax component of that. So that was a big thing. Was completed before rates increased any higher. And so, having been in this for 18 years, it's a school that not only has pulled off a successful expansion, but I guess are gluttons for punishment because they're ready and willing to do it again, but for a good cause. So I appreciate the time, and if there are other questions or follow up, we'll let Tony take those, and then I'm done helping out today.
Member Olson, any follow-up to your question, anything you want to?
No, not at all. That covered all my questions. Thanks.
Yeah, most important, of course, when you're looking at financial needs is not that it was a surprise to you or that you weren't prepared, but that you have a plan. And that's really important, that you obviously you have a plan in place. Sometimes folks don't understand when you build your fund balance, instead of spending it today on operations in the school, but that fund balance makes you a healthy school. And so as you continue to have a plan to build that fund balance, also a rating agency is really happy to see cash on hand and that you have that money put aside for potential rainy days. So all of that work is you're going forward, but mostly that you have a plan in place. So I'm going to talk about now, as we just indicated, your request today is we saw you had to take a little hit for one-time expenses for a new campus, and here you're asking again, what is your plan? I'm suspecting you have a plan in place to say, okay, this is going to happen again. Talk to us about that for a minute.
We've actually already built up the days cash on hand that we had before the first campus, which, I mean, I'm not an accountant, but it's significant because now we're talking about days cash on hand for an organization that was twice the size as the original one. So we've gone back well over 100 days cash on hand with now us like a $12 million annual budget. We've already built up that reserve, and now we actually have 2 schools that contribute to that fund balance every year. And so we're in even better financial position now to open a 3rd campus than we were when we had 1 campus opening a 2nd campus.
Thank you. The plan that you're thinking of that now, instead of later and saying, whoops, we should have thought about that, is what's commendable, that you have that plan in place, that you know where you're going and why. And I encourage you always, of course, to hold on to that, knowing that you've got to continue to build fund balance and not allow individuals to say, but we should be spending it today, because you also have to balance the health overall, your financial health overall, right? Other questions from board members? Vice Chair Phillips, please.
Thank you, Chair Bowles. I love what you've been able to do with the schools that you have, and I know that it started from a small school with great ideas and very passionate people, teachers who believed in the mission and vision of the school. Sometimes that's hard to translate to satellites. You've shown you can do that. How do you anticipate? I would just love to hear it from you. I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it. How do you translate that, keep that quality high, translate that model into what becomes now a very big LEA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily big boxes, as you know, you're an alternative to that in your areas, but nevertheless a big LEA. You're looking at quality control. You're looking at keeping your systems similar to the systems in these somewhat smaller, schools that you've already had authorized, and especially when you're looking at expanded grades and kind of a different program than you've gone into before. I would just love to hear what you've been thinking about relative to those, those matters.
Right. I think the key here is institutional knowledge. Years ago, we knew that we needed to build like a shared knowledge, including a shared language. And what that ended up leading to is we ended up with a lot of really smart, passionate teachers because we worked so closely together for so long. And we had people that were on their own taking up leadership positions all over the place. That led to the 2nd campus being so easy because the principals at that campus had been training with us for years. We then went to our staff and we said, we need to carry this knowledge, this work that we've done into the new campus. Who's willing to go over there? And we had half of the teachers in the new school were teachers that worked with us for years. We're already training the new principals for this new campus. They already work for us. They've already been working with us for years. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to go to our current staff of almost 100 people, and we're going to move people there to carry forward that institutional knowledge. On the high school question, first thing we started looking at is curriculum. What do we want the curriculum structure to look like at our school? And what we did is we modeled it after IDEA Public Schools, which is, I think, the 2nd largest public charter school system in the country. They're in Texas. They serve very similar demographics to us, and they're very, very high performing. It's based on a college prep idea, lots of AP and pre-AP classes from 9th grade to 12th grade. And then 2 years ago, we actually went out and we started hiring high school teachers to be middle school teachers, knowing that they're going to help us build our high school departments. And so we already have a head of our high school math department who works for us. We already have a head of our high school science department that works for us, and the same with language arts. And so we're already well into the stages of being able to roll this out.
Let me add
Thank
to
you.
that.
That's very reassuring.
Oh, if you're reassured, I'm good. I want to add that too. And part of that is the way that we train our principals as well. So on a weekly basis, we meet with our principals at one of the 2 campuses. We walk through all the classrooms and we model what coaching should look like. And we give our principals specific actionable steps that they can do to help teachers be their best. And so our principals are getting trained on a weekly basis, just like we do with our teachers. That's been really helpful because it helps to make sure that that shared vision is intact and aligned with where we want to go. And it's been really fun to watch I mean, the two schools are becoming a little bit different, which is okay. I think if you try to make everything be exactly the same, you run into problems, and it also stifles innovation. Some of our best innovations have come because the two schools have different kind of people running them, and they come up with an idea and then they share it and then we all adopt it. It makes it so that we don't really ever get stagnant as far as what's best for our students. So I think that training of our principals is really, really beneficial. And then we also do our beginning of the year training with all of our teachers is the same across the campuses. And then our weekly training that we do with our teachers is also very similar.
Additional comments? Member Smith, go ahead.
Can I make a motion? Is that okay? Or do you have more comments first?
Let's see if we do.
Okay.
Member Spiker, go ahead, and then I will come back to you, Member Smith. Thank you so much. Or Member Cisneros. Yeah. So let's Member Spiker first, and then Member Cisneros.
Thank you. I'm on your website right now and I'm reading that your number one goal is to ensure every student attends and graduates from at least a four-year college. And I'm anticipating your first graduates that were eighth graders when you first opened or have moved through a four-year program. Have you collected any data about your graduates? And could you share that? I know that you've got 4 years that are out of your control right now. And I understand that that's why you want this, because I think that makes complete sense. I'm just curious if you have any of that data to share today.
Yeah, well, I think that's why we're here today, is because of that data. So we looked at our first couple classes of 7th and 8th graders. We tracked them all the way through high school. And what we found is that our students do this every year. They get better and better and better and better. In fact, when you look at our middle schools, the performance of our middle schools is just through the roof. The problem is that when they are leaving us in 8th grade, they're going back to the same system that failed them. And so what happens is we see our kids climb. They leave us. They go right back to where they were before they came to us, which is why we're here. This is an urgent thing for us. We know that we want to get our kids to college, and what we're doing in 8th grade is great for some of them. Some of our kids are going on and they're taking AP classes in 9th grade, and they're on a great track for graduation and going to college. But a lot of our kids are just marginalized and pushed off to the side, and they're not being successful. So that's why as a school, and we looked at those kids, we were like, we have to have high school. The only way we're really gonna see these kids go to four-year colleges is by seeing them all the way through. And instead of having them go up and then go down, if we can keep them going up by the time they go to high school, or by the time they go to college, they're gonna be absolutely ready for it. And so that's why we're here today. We've tracked them, and the data was appalling. So we had to build ourselves to get to this point.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Member Spiker, to that you've got? And Member Cisneros.
My first question's to staff. Dr. Evans, could you go back a couple slides where you have their enrollment right there? No, yeah, right there. So in the application, and I don't know if numbers are transposed. So in the application, it's the max we're approving is 1290, and here you have 2910. So I just want to make sure that 1290 is what we're.
1290 is what this campus would be. The 2910 would be all the Wallace Stegner campuses.
So this is a third campus that's a K-12 campus that they're asking for.
Correct.
Okay. So would this is being rolled up into a larger LEA number, 3 school numbers. Okay. So now to Wallace Stegner. Thank you for the market survey stuff, because the application, I was like, help me understand what you're going to do, right? Because we're all struggling, right, for kids statewide. So help me understand your specific number of students served by grade. So you have 60, 30, 90. So, and then 60, 30, 120, 60, 120. So help me understand why your middle school drops off and your high school gets big. And this is it because you're feeding the 3 in and this is just to this campus? This is not LEA? Okay. So, just what I just want to hear the rationale for the numbers and spacing, and because you got at this campus, you've got 60, how is your junior high configured and look to support these numbers?
So yeah, when you look at those numbers, we always anticipate, number one, that our middle school enrollment initially is going to be smaller because it's hard to pull middle schoolers from their friends. I tried to do it with my own kids and they lost it. I mean, you thought I took away their Nintendo or something. So we purposely we have a smaller number in our middle school because we know that there are going to be some families that are going to want their kids in our elementary school and they want to do one-stop shopping essentially, and so their middle school kids will come. So those numbers are smaller, and it's a bubble that works its way up. The other reason why those numbers are, when you're looking at like our ninth grade and up, initially they're smaller because we only have 2 schools filtering to that ninth grade. And then as the 8th graders at our new campus filter up, that's why that number bumps up. And I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, the other reason why the numbers are that way is we found that if you go full bore and you try, we want to build our school organically. We want to keep kids in the system that are in our school that are familiar with the system, so they're not coming into something that is completely new and having to acclimate to that. So it's an organic growth. We'll have our 3 campuses that filter into the one for our high school, so that all the students have that opportunity. Does that answer your question?
How does your junior high currently work? So it's 7, 8. Are these numbers representative of what you're currently teaching? And are you planning to do 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 6? Like what does this look like when you now add that 9 through 12 component on?
Yeah, so currently we have between 60 and 75 students in each grade at each campus for 7th and 8th grade. And for the high school, it's just that they just all come together and go up.
But are you
Maybe
going to
I'm
look
missing
at,
something.
so are you going to, at this K through 12 campus, so I'm assuming you're going to not have 12th graders roaming the same hall as first graders.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the
So-
campus will have different wings for different.
Okay,
groups
so
of kids.
how are you gonna have like a junior high configuration with 7, 8, or you're gonna have K through 6, 7, 8, 9 through 12, like a traditional high school?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
exactly right.
And then how does that match with how, I know Granite, how does Salt Lake do their grade?
They're
It's the
both
same.
Yeah,
They're both the same.
They
9
have
through 12?
their middle school in Salt Lake, so 6, 7, and 8 are together. But we found that the more we can keep kids with the homeroom, the more successful they are. If you remember our first couple of years in Salt Lake, we had a homeroom model. As we got bigger, we decided to kind of shift that more towards being like a traditional middle school model, except for it's just 7th and 8th grade. And then as the high school builds, we'll continue to build it to mirror more like a high school and not like a homeroom setting.
Okay. And are these the high school break-even numbers? Because the cost of first grade is drastically different than the cost of 12th grade.
I don't think these are break-even numbers.
Like
The break-even
how
numbers would be
small-
significantly smaller.
How small do you think you could go in your high school and still be effective?
I'm not sure if we've ever divvied out like individual grades out of the school system. I think that we always look at break-even number as like an LEA or even a school-wide thing. Like some grades are loss leaders, right? Especially when you're first opening a school, but the break-even numbers would be significantly less than that.
Well, and I agree you have the advantage, right, of distributing across your LEA. So yeah, totally. No, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions? Anyone have additional questions? All right, now I go to Member Smith.
I love what you guys are doing. I'm so pleased and proud that we have the opportunity to authorize you. And I think we all look at the schools in our portfolio as these are our babies, right? we want everyone to be as successful as you have been. So I would like to make a motion that we approve the Wallace Stegner Academy's satellite application.
Right, a motion to approve Wallace Stegner's satellite application, a second to that motion,
I'll second that.
and a second from Member Olson. So an initial motion from Member Smith and a second from Member Olson. Any discussion, further discussion about that? All right, seeing none, I think we're ready to take a vote. And then I do want to make one last little comment at the end, if we may. All those in favor of that motion to approve, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? That's a unanimous endorsement of the work you do, and that will connect to my statement to say thank you. Thank you for taking good care of kids. Those benchmarks that you're able to take kids from where they are, it's the growth that is really the remarkable piece of it, not that they're just meeting at after a year's work, but you can take them from where they are and you're meeting your goal to help kids who academically might not be successful and helping them to do that and to reach those places. As you continue to work, I'll come back to just remember, build that fund balance, make sure that your depreciation doesn't get away from you, that you're making capital investment at a rate close to your depreciation so that doesn't bite you in the long run. Remember, as I looked at ESL endorsed teachers, as you have second language learners, just to remember it's a common problem across the state. We sometimes do not have enough ESL endorsed teachers. If you're teaching in California, you almost have to go with your license and an ESL endorsement to get a job, but we haven't done that as well in Utah. Just as a reminder, if ever we're audited, that is something to work toward. It's not something you're going to accomplish tomorrow. It's going to take a little bit of time. But I also commend you and know that you're going to now in that 912 range have accreditation fund to do too. So if you ever need any support from us or any of the staff, those of us who've been through that, we'd be glad to support you and help you to know how to be successful in navigating that. We want you to continue to be successful for those students. And I also commend you for, and I hope that others take the time to come and see what you do, that this is a model that from which others can learn about how to help kids to succeed. But mostly I'm so impressed with your coaching of teachers. I think you use Teach Like a Champion as well.
Yes, we
right?
do.
Yeah, which I just think is such a remarkable resource. But you not only teach coaching teachers, but principals who should be coaching teachers who often do not know how to do that. And that's a big deficit that we have. No one teaches principals how to do that unless in that LEA they do that. And so thank you for doing that as well. So many good things that we should take the time to have others look at you. I hope you won't mind if sometimes we say, hey, could we have visitors come and talk with you? And then just those other couple little things to keep working on, and just know that it's part of your plan, that that's where you're going. Okay. So thank you for being here. Congratulations. We so appreciate the work you do.
Thank you. And on behalf of all of our families as well, thank you. Like you're making their dreams come true.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right. Oh, is it? So we can begin. See, I told you we were going to catch up, right? And we did. So, we're only at 10 minutes away. Yeah, I was wondering that same thing. Is that possible? I'm thinking that, annually we are required to have open public meeting training, just as a reminder of what's acceptable within the law and what is not. And so we have it scheduled at 12:30. I'm wondering if we could do that now, then go to lunch. I think we have time potentially. And then right after lunch, would it be possible then just to immediately begin with our legislative discussion? Vice Chair Phillips, would that be all right?
Absolutely.
All right. So could we go to that training? Are all of you willing to hang on? I don't think anybody is. You don't look like you're. Yeah, you've got time, and so I think you're okay. All right, so if that is possible to do, I'm going to ask Ms. Stephenson if she'll present that training for us.
I am happy to share our OTMA training. And let me give you a little bit of background before we get into that. Over the last few years, of course, we've had our yearly annual OTMA training. And usually that has been something that David has provided for us. And in case you didn't know, some of the ones that he has used actually had our new AAG, Kevin's grandkids in them. And those have been cute and fun. And so when Director Lambert asked me to provide the training today, I went through my files materials. This is something I do for schools a lot, and was looking through them and thought, well, if David and Kevin can use their grandkids, maybe I could make a more fun training and use my cute kids. And as I've talked with my own children, they are always very jealous that I get to do presentations and PowerPoints at work. As they've gotten to explore that at school, they always think that sounds like the most fun thing about having a job someday. So they were very excited to help. So my two children, Henry is a third grader. They are both part of the Utah public education system as well. And he is an advanced reader and wanted to take all the big reading parts. There are some tricky words, so listen carefully. But I think he does a pretty good job for being a third grader, getting through this OPMA training. And then my daughter, Ruby, is in 6th grade and also in our public education system, and does a really great job. She actually has a little bit of a learning disability and is well served at her school with some supports there. And it was just fun to see how they came together and wanted to help me in providing a great training for our board. And now they both consider themselves OPMA experts, as you will be as well. So without further ado, I will turn our time over to our experts, Ruby and Henry. Just desktop, right? It's on my desktop, or do I pull this up first? Let me see if I go here. Luckily, I've got Dr. Evans here.
Hi, I'm Henry. And I'm Ruby. Today we're here to help with a training about OPMA. As you know, this is a required yearly training, and any training you get every year can start to feel, well, boring. Hopefully with us as your guides, we can make OPMA a little more fun. Okay, Henry, what is OPMA? OPMA is the Open Public Meeting Act. To put it simply, OPMA requires that public business be done in public. OPMA defines a meeting as the convening of a public body or specified body with a quorum present, including a workshop or an executive session. The meeting could be in person or by means of electronic communication, and is considered a meeting if it is for the purpose of discussing, receiving comments from the public about or acting upon a matter over which the public body or a specific body has jurisdiction or advisory power. So then, what isn't a meeting? OPMA says a meeting does not mean a chance gathering or a social gathering like a birthday party or a fancy night out. Cheers! Can you remind us what a quorum is? Quorum means a simple majority of the membership of a public body, unless otherwise defined by law. What do we need to review about notices and agendas? A notice must be posted at least 24 hours in advance of meeting, posted at public body's office, and posted on the public notice website. The agenda must be posted with notice and must be reasonably specific. For example, if I said I'm going to talk about my sister, that would not be specific enough. If I said I'm going to talk about the wonderful things my sister Ruby does, that would provide enough specificity that the general public would know what to expect.
Great example, brother.
Should note that a public body must give public notice at least once a year of its annual meeting schedule.
Let's pause and see if anyone has questions or comments. Okay, now we're back. Let's talk about minutes and recordings. Those are required, right?
Yes to both. Even though there's an audio recording, the approved written minutes will be the official record. Make sure your written minutes have the date, time, and place of meeting, names of who is present and absent, substance of all matters proposed, discussed, or decided, record by individual member of each vote taken, the name of each person who makes the public comment, and the substance of the comment, and any other information that any member requests be entered in the meeting of recording.
When do minutes and audio recordings have to be posted?
Pending minutes, available to public within 30 days after the meeting. Approved minutes, posted to the public notice website within 3 business days of the public body's approval. Audio recordings, posted to the public notice website within 3 business days after the meeting.
I've really enjoyed all the virtual meeting options since 2020. Can the board just do a virtual meeting?
Public bodies may meet by phone or other electronic means that allows participants to hear or observe communications. However, notice requirements still apply, and there must be an anchor location. If health or safety concerns still exist like they did during the early pandemic, this requirement may be waived.
What if a board has their yearly schedule posted, but an emergency comes up?
Alma calls that an emergency meeting, these must be due to unexpected situations. An example might be a broken water line that cannot wait for the next scheduled meeting. Failure to turn in a report on time isn't an unexpected situation.
Even though it's an emergency, try to give the best notice possible. Notify all members of the public body and have a majority of the board members approve the meeting.
Let's pause here for any questions or discussions.
Now, I'm thinking we should talk about closed meetings.
Closed meetings are very important to understand. As board members, you play an important role in building and reinforcing the bonds of trust between local government and citizens. Your job is to promote the rule of law and to foster a culture of compliance. When you perform well, you can increase the confidence in local government and provide reassurance that the government is functioning within the confines of the law.
Let's remind them, can a board just close a meeting whenever they want?
No, sis. There are very few reasons a meeting can be closed. Since they've had this training each year, let's pause and see if they can name 7 major reasons to close a meeting. According to Atma, there are more, but they apply to specific boards. How did they do? As a reminder, the 7 major reasons to close a meeting are 1. To discuss character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. 2. To discuss collective bargaining. 3. To discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation. 4. To discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property. 5. To discuss the sale of property. 6. To discuss security personnel, devices, or systems. 7. To investigate proceedings regarding allegations of criminal misconduct.
Here are some helpful reminders about closed sessions. A quorum must be present. A motion to close the meeting must be made naming the specific reason for the closure. A roll call vote must be taken. 2/3 of the body must approve of the closed meeting.
Some of the reasons for a closed session do not require a recording, but rather a sworn statement that the purpose of the closed meeting was to discuss this issue. Others require a recording to be made, so make sure you are aware of the requirements of your purpose.
And probably the most important thing, no votes are taken in closed meetings.
Wow, Ruby, you know your stuff about closed sessions.
Henry, did you know that some things are forbidden during closed meetings?
Forbidden? What?
Yes, a board may not approve anything, interview anyone, take final action, or talk about closed sessions outside of closed sessions.
Since those things are forbidden, what happens if a person or a board violates OPMA?
A court can void any action in violation of the law. Sometimes a violation can be fixed by discussing and taking a public vote in later meeting. However, you might have to pay court costs and attorney fees. Also, those who intentionally violate or advise violations of closed meetings provisions may be found guilty of a Class B misdemeanor, which could lead to 6 months in jail or a $1,000 fine.
Yikes.
Don't worry, we've got this.
You're right. Maybe we could recap with a few simple closed session reminders.
1. Closed session is a choice. If you know the purpose is not allowable, speak up.
2. Working out differences and finding ways to get along with one another is board business, not closed session business.
3. A performance evaluation is different from a goal-setting session. Set goals in an open meeting.
4. The agenda is no place for misdirection. Make sure your board is being transparent.
5. Confidentiality is key. What is discussed in a closed session stays in a closed session.
Thanks, sis. That helps. I feel much better.
Well, I think that about wraps everything up.
Wait! Don't you think it'd be better if we end with a game?
Actually, yes. What are you thinking?
Board members, can you fill in the blank? Make sure you give blank our notice.
The answer is 24.
Your agenda items need to be blank.
Specific.
Closed meetings are only for blank purposes.
The answer was allowable.
Series training on OPMA blank time per year. 1. Approved minutes must be posted within blank days.
The answer is 3.
When in doubt, consult your blank counsel.
Legal. Wow, great job, board members.
I can tell this is a very smart group.
Thanks for doing ALMA training with us. See you next year.
Thank you. And tell Ruby and Henry we appreciate their work as well to do that. Now they need to work on the airline air mask, fasten your seatbelts speech too. They can manage that. So thank you so much for that. And it's important that we are just refreshed and remember the how to all the pieces of that law. We now go to lunch. Apparently lunch is here and ready to go. We're just a couple minutes early, but it is ready. It was earlier than we are. And we'll be back in here at 12:30, ready to have some legislative discussion and possible actions from that. Okay, see you. Yeah, see you downstairs. All right, welcome back after lunch. Thank you to those who arranged a nice lunch for us. We appreciate it, and we're ready to begin. So on our agenda, we had the open public meeting training. At this point, we already enjoyed that just before lunch. It was a good way to send off. Thanks to Ruby and Henry. And we are now on our agenda at the point of the legislative discussion, which Vice Chair Phillips will lead us through that.
Thank you so much, Chair Bowles. I first want to start out by thanking the Utah State Board of Education for prioritizing a number of things in their budget that were extremely helpful to charter schools, including base funding, which is a funding that provides something for administrative costs that charter schools need. You see that with small districts and kind of medium small districts. And it is a recognition that there are economies of scale that aren't always provided for in other line items for smaller LEAs. And they prioritized, of course, full day kindergarten, a nice raise to the WPU, and all of the things that really help our charter schools and all students in public education. And we have been working in various committees with the leadership of the Utah State Board of Education, and particularly staff as well, who were crunching numbers for us behind the scenes to see what would be a good ask for that base funding for charters. And that's that leadership. And we've got some wonderful friends on the Utah State Board of Education who are supportive not only of charter schools, but of all students in public education, but they don't forget about the charter school kids. And so I just appreciate that so much. I really wanted to make sure I said that. In addition, we've had wonderful leadership from the Utah Charter Network and from the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, who have championed a number of very important supportive things for charter schools, including putting their support behind the base funding and behind some other things in funding that have helped charters. So a big thanks to all of those individuals, and they do the lion's share of the work. We come in and push and sometimes participate on committees and keep at the fore of their minds some of our charter school needs. But in the end, they do a lot of the heavy lifting there, and we really appreciate it. I wanted to mention, first of all, that one of the things that we're watching is a bill that has not been numbered yet. And one of our good friends at the state legislature is Representative Susan Pulsifer. She has a bill that is amendments to reports and requirements, and the process there that we're watching and hoping it gets into the Education Committee and is passed. And this is the outgrowth of a year-long Reports and Requirements Committee task force that was really, I think, given momentum by Representative Pulsifer's legislative success in passing bills in previous sessions that were an attempt to reduce reporting going forward for any new bills and to kind of review and have the Utah State Board of Education reviewing some of its current requirements to see if it's a statutory obligation to see if there was any way we could, even if it was discovered to be one, if it could be streamlined in some way, and an effort to just reduce the costs associated with those kinds of things, and also to find out who was using them. Sometimes it's become standard to attach that onto a bill and not really ever know whatever happens to it after somebody puts a lot of time into it and effort. So one of the things that's happened then this year is this particular bill is intended, I think, to sunset and streamline a few more reports than even were done in the past. And these come out of that committee as recommendations, and now they're going to get some statutory momentum. That Reports and Requirements Task Force is not done, and under new leadership in the Utah State Board of Education, I think it's been given kind of renewed energy, and Chair Moss is committed to looking at um, systemically ways to reduce reporting in a way that I'm not sure that it's been looked at until now. And so we're excited for the future there, and we are a number of us from staff and board are participating on that committee and hope to see some additional things come out in the legislative session in 2024. So just to give you kind of an overview of some things we have been supporting, and here's the good news. Sometimes we come into this meeting and you get a legislative report from me where I say, we need a discussion. Should we support this? Should we support that? A lot of the things that we supported have already been passed. And that would include an increase to base funding, as I mentioned, which has been made, which is both an increase and has been made ongoing. And we're hoping that when the West Ed study comes out that discusses funding for small districts, that there will be enough information that could be applicable to charters, particularly those medium and small charters, that would in fact allow us to go and eventually get that base funding tied to the WPU. Because not only are we as charter supporters, but the legislature is sick of us coming and asking for it. From time to time or from year to year, as the case may be. So we're looking for some kind of a formula that makes sense, that's fair, that can be ongoing. Lots of money was appropriated this year to education in big bundles and in smaller bundles, and it's also been allocated in a more flexible way than we've seen in many years. That's good for innovation, and that's good for districts and charters. The kindergarten, full-day kindergarten for those who want it, has been fully funded. So I just wanted to make sure that if you haven't been paying attention that you know that. Another thing that's happened is that, as I mentioned, not only have the LEAs been given more flexibility in how they spend money, but there has been, with the money that has been given more flexibility and decrease in paperwork and reports. This is in addition to Representative Pulsipher's bills or anticipated bill. And also that allows teachers and administrators to use their creative energy in helping students and faculty. There was also set to sunset a 35%, the 35% of monies from other programs that could be used flexibly, and that sunsetting has been removed, so that will continue. And I was told by UAPCS that of the 62 LEAs that have taken advantage of that original 35% flexibility, 60 are charter schools. So we're leading out on looking for ways to do that. As you know, there was an innovation sort of regulatory sandbox and education bill that became law a while ago. The Utah State Board of Education has that in rule now to reflect the statute. And so we can also, and that's something that we worked on with now Chair Moss, and that we can anticipate both districts and schools benefiting from that going forward. It sometimes takes a little while from conception of an idea to its passage in the legislature to its reflection in board rule to people actually being able to access it. So that's been a long, almost 4-year process. Couple of things that are of interest to us that you may want to watch, and that I think we're monitoring. We're not necessarily asking for support today, though that anyone could take a motion on granting us support if they so desired. HB 134 from Representative Pulsipher. This gives us a nice list of the order of who should be paid when a charter school closes. Having been involved in that process for a friend in the past, I can say this is extremely helpful. And when you consider some of our charter schools that have recently closed, it would have been helpful to them to know, should I pay my employees first? Should I do this? Should I do that? And Representative Pulsipher has put together a nice list that, just even for clarity, is helpful. In HB 224, we have a teacher and parental postpartum recovery leave. This has mixed reviews from charter community. Some people don't like the interference. Other people think that's good policy. SB 55 from Senator Fillmore. This is the adoption of learning materials using a traditional public process and with the option for local boards to use a policy, the promotion of a policy and the approval of a policy to make sure that they have all approved the curricula that's already being used. So it's a little different from last session's bill, but does ask for a public process. And mostly we're usually supportive of transparency. We also want to weigh that against, the cost of time and effort for teachers and LEAs. So that's something that we can see the benefit of in some instances and might not take a position on at this time. We also, one that could very much affect us is SB 65. It's where this is also by Senator Fillmore, where charter school authorizers will be required, should this pass, to essentially use procedures akin to those under admin rules procedures when adopting standards, guidelines, or policies. And what that does is that it essentially would require, for instance, our committees to become open committee meetings. We've even talked among ourselves about both the advantages and disadvantages of that. There are always those sorts of things. We're not a rulemaking body, so there's an argument maybe this shouldn't apply to us, but then it also embraces transparency, and we typically are supportive of that. So we just are monitoring that. Senator Fillmore was kind enough to leave language in there that still gives us a home in the State Board of Education offices. So, excuse me. So that helps us out as we work out our MOU with the Utah State Board of Education. That's a very helpful continuance and allowance for us. In HB 61, school safety amendments, this is sponsored by Wilcox in the House, Representative Wilcox, and it creates a task force to establish minimum safety services that Utah Public Schools must provide. So we'll be watching that because this may impact our charters as well as districts. We also have, I thought this was interesting, especially if you've ever been a teacher, and as you know, I have for many years. There is a tax credit for education expenses. This is by Representative Birkeland, a non-refundable individual income tax credit of up to $500 per eligible school employee for out-of-pocket classroom expenses. Now, part of it I love and I want to cheer, and the other part I want to say, why should teachers have to have any any expenses out of pocket? But it's still a recognition that sometimes we just do that as teachers, even just because we want to.
So it's up 500?
Yeah, as a tax credit from the individual teacher.
This is a separate thing.
A tax credit. Yes, yes. We also have a couple of other bills that seek to require a lot more sensitivity to digital resources that might be used in a classroom, both including whether or not they have sensitive materials and whether or not that ought to be then posted and kind of go through a similar public process to the curriculum. One of them is being run by Representative Ballard, and there's another one as well. Interestingly enough, we've heard this before, but I think this bill, HB 175, from Representative Strong, this is school fee amendments. It will disallow any curricular fees, including textbooks, starting next school year. Now, this has been phasing in over time. This isn't a huge shock, but now we have sort of a deadline, okay? And so that even means rental for books and things like that. LEAs will need to fit that into their, get that from the WPU in their operating budget. One thing that actually sounds like it doesn't make that big of a difference, but it actually will, is SB 44, which is from Senator Milner. You'll recall that she's always been a champion of early reading. The bill that was passed last year was pretty prescriptive about at least the rubric, and as software for reading is reviewed by the State Board of Education, it goes out and is allowable for schools, including charters. And she is loosening that up a little bit and allowing some reading software that does not meet the statistical effect size specified in last year's SB 127. You'd be surprised at how many charter schools have worried about that. So it sounds minuscule, but it allows these particularly small charters who are using what otherwise nationally, seems like a really good software, or locally for them with their own data. they would like to continue to use that. They're having great results, and this little tweak will allow that. And you may be aware that a joint resolution number 3, a proposal to amend Utah Constitution property tax exemptions. This is sponsored by Senator Fillmore. It authorizes the state to exempt from property tax privately owned real property used to support public education or individuals with a disability. So I'm not sure of the exact real estate that would affect, but it might even be able to affect some private property that is being used to support some of our charter school PE activities and other activities, or might give a partial exemption. I'm not sure how that will look in the end. One of the things that's interesting and that affects us is HB 185, public ed enrollment options from Representative Pulsifer. And this will be something that, will be perhaps clarified when it comes down through Board of Education rule, but it allows a local public education agency to provide a home-centered, school-supported enrollment option, allowing students to complete a portion of the student's coursework from home. And essentially, it's not entirely different from some of the dual enrollment options that we've seen before that are creative, that allow kind of some home and district, or two different LEAs, but we'll have to see what that looks like coming out. Finally, one that I'm interested in personally, but that is unique enough, I'm going to mention it, and I don't think our board should take a position on it. I'm not mentioning it because of that, but it has been illegal in the state of Utah to even use the word consent. And we do an excellent job in other curricula like child abuse prevention and child internet safety protection for very young children. In fact, both of those curricula are offered to K through 12 students, even all the way down to kindergarten. But this has bipartisan support, which is another thing that makes it interesting. So you have Representative Spackman Moss and Senator Cullimore, who are both co-sponsors of this bill. And it requires the state board to establish curriculum requirements that includes instruction in sexual assault, resource strategies, sexual violence behavior prevention, legal implications of electronically distributing sexually explicit images. So there's a safety component in there, and amends provisions related to when a student receives health ed instruction. So it actually requires it to be at certain grades versus where it is right now, and other requirements that are related. And this would be an effort based on the research that's coming back even as late as recently, as 2020, that when you teach children about boundaries, even if it's just about your lunchbox, that you also teach someone to receive amicably those boundaries that you've set up, and how that is an important component of what we teach our students in school, to belong to a community. And so anyway, just some interesting bills that we're following that. Of course, education always has literally the most bills that are in the entire legislative process. So there, if you actually go into, the legislative site and you put in education, you will be reading for a week. So these are some that are specifically interesting, I thought, given our current laws on the books, and also interesting because they directly affect charters or perhaps us as an authorizer.
Vice Chair Phillips, thank you for that report. We have oftentimes, and I don't know if you're requesting that we've sometimes, and I don't think we have yet this year, kind of given authorization to our legislative representatives, plurals often, but now Vice Chair Phillips has been handling this all on her own these days, but that we've often said as there are substitute bills, as amendments are made, as we look at the new bills introduced, that we've given her the authority to represent us, because we don't convene a meeting to talk about each one individually, that we've often said, our philosophy, and we kind of support that. I don't know if you're looking for that kind of a motion of support.
I am not at this time. We may need to do that, and if there's something that's really vital. But as I said, a lot of things have been kind of established that we had already decided as a board we would promote, and so certainly if there's a bill that somebody wants to make a motion about, I think that could be done. And may I just add one other thing? Because
Absolutely.
So Executive Director Lambert and I went and gave the, I guess you could say, status update on our board. And one of the things that is maybe important for this board to know, and by the way, Director Lambert did an outstanding job with that, and it was interesting. It was kind of interactive. It showed some of the art that we got from our fantastic contest. And one of her goals, which was met, was that let them think anything of us, but let them not think we're boring, right? And we definitely were not in because of her presentation. But one of the things that's been irritating to the legislature is that our startup funds, when we don't start up a huge number of satellites or new schools, though we have authorized quite a few new satellites and recently a new school, but when they're not used to the same level that you have monies being allocated for that, it makes us look like we're hoarding money and not spending it. It makes us look like we're not being fiscally responsible and not fiscally responsible in the sense of spending money for what it's not for or spending too much, but that basically we're not maybe directing it properly or some other thing. So those are very restricted funds. We can't touch them until you need it for startup, right? And they're the kind of funds that you really need them when you need them and you don't when you don't. And so, in years past, in decades past even, those funds have been heavily drawn on, and they're less drawn on right now. We have a very good process for, but it's much more stringent than it has been in the past. We're at a higher bar. We aren't authorizing as many schools as were authorized 10 years ago. Satellites were doing, pretty well on that, but again, the numbers are down. So we were worried that one of the things we needed to convey was the importance of looking at our allocations separately as operational costs and training costs and startup funds and different things so that they really knew where these monies were going and what they were allocated for and so on. So the point is, and often our training costs and operational costs are flexible if we're not allocated to the extent that we need to be. We can even use some of those monies in a commingling way, but not the startup funds. So we asked for a legislative solution in that we said, please don't take away any of our operational funds. We need those. We're at a good staff level. We want to be robust. We want to do what you want us to do, which is monitoring. We're doing better than we have, even, perhaps in our board's history. And a lot of that is because the legislature recognized we needed the staff we have. And please make visible the carryover or the startup funds over here that we're carrying over from year to year, so that you can see, or even hold them at the legislative level until they're needed, so that it doesn't appear that we don't need the money that we are being allocated for operational expenses and others that are earmarked for things. So we hope that message got through. It appears that it has in what was allocated, but I want you to know that that we have a really good staff who recognizes the importance of sending a clear message to the legislature about needs and ensuring that they understand. And, it's something that the board might have passed over if I hadn't reported it today, that we are continually each year trying to make sure that we have the money we need to do our statutory obligations. That is probably one of the most important things that happened this legislative session for our board, and I almost passed over it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Do any of you have questions, things you'd like to discuss relative to the legislative session, things you might want to ask Vice Chair Phillips? Anyone? Keep watching. Of course, this legislative session ends on March 3rd. Not that anyone is counting those days, but it ends on March 3rd, and then the governor has 20 days beyond that to purposely sign or veto bills that have passed in the legislative session, or their enactment clauses just take care of the enactment of those bills into code. But watch for things. If there are things that will help our schools that you say, hey, we need a legislative solution to this in the future, always watching and seeing some of those. I'll tell you that last Wednesday, I was in the Education Appropriations Committee, and a great presentation was made by a few folks from our regional service centers. I don't know if all of you know the regional service centers, but Utah has 4 regional service centers that were established in 1969 to service primarily rural districts. And that we had rural and non-rural districts in 1969, and they provided tremendous service. I think Member Bassett's district where she works is part of CUES, I think, right? Of the CUES Regional Service Center, and it allows them to pool resources to one group, to hire in that regional service center resources so that one district has to have that cost, but they kind of share costs across, something that they might use periodically among all of those districts. So there are 26 rural districts that are served through those regional service centers. But it's interesting that from along the Wasatch Front, as I show the map, there is not a service center. It's just on the map white, because there is no service center there. And some of us sitting there thinking, things have changed since 1969. We have the majority of our LEAs are saying it serves all of these LEAs. Well, it doesn't serve every LEA in the sense of they're saying these are big districts along the Wasatch Front, they don't need it. So as we're thinking about things, and maybe there's not an appetite, and maybe it comes with strings attached that we don't want, but I thought, should we have a service center along that Wasatch Front that serves charters? Because we have a lot of LEAs along the Wasatch Front who might be able to then have a service center where they can get the buying power together, have joint service together, that they might be able to hire special ed service or a psychologist who helps to evaluate testing, other things that one LEA, one of our charters couldn't do alone, but pooled together in a service center, they might. So the service centers actually provide great service, but I wonder if we need to update this. As I sat there, just as my example, I thought we need to update our service centers. And I think others who are sitting there, since I see Kim Frank here, I was sitting next to Kim, and we both at the same time, I think, said, this would be what a great opportunity to have. We need a service center in that area for the LEAs that are charter LEAs. Yeah.
So I think it's a great idea, and I was part of NEWS when on the board of NEWS when I was a director at a certain rural charter school. But in many ways, our Wasatch Front charters, many of them, not all of them, but the medium, smaller ones could greatly benefit from that. And I wanted to mention too, we do have Kim Frank here from the Utah Charter Network, and I believe Royce Van Tassel from the UAPCS. And they're, in the past, we've often given them a few minutes during legislative update to provide us with some texture that I cannot. And so perhaps that might be something.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we close this discussion, that's exactly where we need to go. But let me just close up. If there are things that you see, this is a place where we should talk about those. If there are legislative solutions that you hear of, you think about, we're not going to pass that kind of work this session, but now's the time to start thinking of the 2024 or 2025 sessions. What are some things that will help our schools that someone may have inadvertently just left off the table, or some things that just a minor tweak will help. And those who work really closely are Royce and Kim. And this is a great time for, if you would like to add, Royce, if you want to add some, come up to the table, and then Kim will give you some time as well. If either of you or both of you would like to share some of the work you're doing, I know you're both there more than the rest of us sitting here. So we'd love to hear your input. Thank you so much. Royce, do you want to lead out, and then Kim, if you'll follow.
Good afternoon. Royce Van Tassel, Utah Association of Public Charter Schools. I think that everybody in public ed, frankly, should be doing backflips over the recommendations that came out of the Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee. The if you sort of if you look at the proposed direct WPU increase plus the 200 or so million dollars for teacher pay, plus the increase, the full day kindergarten, plus the increases to, and I don't remember what this add-on is, but essentially for the difficult to educate children in our K-12 system, it totals roughly a 12. I can even do the numbers to get as high as 14% increase on the value of the WPU, and all of that in ongoing funds. And that funding is essentially all unrestricted. And if there are two messages that come out of those recommendations, it's here's a bunch of money. We love you, public education. And second, we want you to come back and impress us with what you can do. It's not our job to tell you, Ben Leishman told me he remembered, he's the fiscal analyst for the State Board of Education, that at one of the sessions, they had 110 separate items that Public Ed Appropes had prioritized with the ongoing money. This time, all of the separate line items for both ongoing and one-time, in fact, this is it. One page. This is an unprecedented sea change, and one that, as charter schools especially, we should be thrilled at. The work that you and Cindy and Representative Pulsifer, and before her Senator Henderson, now Lieutenant Governor, have championed about reducing paperwork. Most of that comes down to how many different line items do we have to justify that we're using this money correctly? And them saying, here's gobs of money, go and do good things. We're not going to micromanage that, is going to go a long way in reducing that. That's that. So we should be doing backflips over that. The decisions have come out of Public Ed Appropes. They will be ratified. There will inevitably be some changes by the executive appropriations. They'll hear those recommendations from the various subcommittees this afternoon and tomorrow, and then in a couple, 3 weeks, final budgets will come out. That being said, the basic structure, I don't anticipate significant changes to them. Things are in a really good place. I will say that Cindy really hit, I think, most of the important pieces when it comes to specific bills. I can go into more detail if you have specific questions on any of those. I guess I should, this is maybe a request from that I've heard a couple of times now from Representative Doug Welton and Senator Fillmore. Last year, I think it was, Representative Welton really did create, especially at the classroom level, the educational sandbox that Cindy was talking about. And to date, no one has taken advantage of that. I don't know if it's because people don't know about it or if it's because people are afraid that their knuckles are going to get wrapped. I've told this story a couple of times that when I was talking to directors last August about, hey, make sure you've got everything lined up for the paid professional days. And directors kept telling me that can't be that simple. I just have to have a conversation in an email that says, here's how we're going to use this money. There's got to be a form that I've got to fill out. Someone's going to come back and wrap my knuckles. And I said, no, it's really that simple, which I took as a very clear indication that people don't really believe that the flexibility is going to be given. We've created a culture that is more interested in compliance than creativity. And the legislature wants us to be moving that way. And I think that we need to do a better job. And I'm speaking for all of us in the public ed community, but charter schools especially, in saying, hey, Representative Welton's given us some tools, let's go use those. We've used, as Cindy pointed out, the flexibility that Senator Fillmore has provided, but there are other opportunities and we should be taking advantage of those. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. And that's a good reminder that as follow-up to legislative session, it's a good thing for us to say, do you know about? Here's something, because I think you're exactly right. There are many who are doing good work with kids every day and just trying to keep up with what's happening in classrooms, and they don't know of opportunities that have come their way. Do you know, I'm going to also ask, you have that, the sheet must have come from EdAppropriate, that those line items. Did it come off the site as well? I'm saying that because I wonder if anybody else would like to have a copy. Is it online?
It is. I sent the link to Cindy earlier today.
Would you?
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you. I know we'd like to see it and to look through those line items. Thank you for showing us. All right. Any questions for Royce? Any of you have things you want to ask? Go ahead, Representative Cisneros.
So I know this was just in committee. Any progress on HB 270 about the cell phones in classes? Is it going to come out of committee?
No, that died a week and a half ago. It died pretty hard, actually. No, it died pretty hard in committee.
Committee this morning, Tusher, I think it was the other curriculum one died in committee this morning as well. So
Yeah, I think there's broad agreement among the public ed community that folks are very comfortable with Senator Fillmore's bill. If anything, Representative Tusher's bill labors under the backwash from last year.
Yeah.
But I think Senator Fillmore spent a lot of time last session and in the interim saying, how do we provide the kind of transparency that parents want without creating undue burdens on teachers and LEAs? And yeah, I haven't heard anybody that says, oh, what Senator Fillmore is doing is inappropriate. There's very broad agreement there.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Perhaps, Royce, you could also comment on, I've been watching it, but haven't watched it recently, that there's an expansion of authorizers in the state, potentially.
Sure.
And that would be something, of course, we've gone on record numerous times talking about including in front of the legislature when we gave our status update, that we welcome a sort of robust authorizing environment in our state.
So a couple things to say there. One, nothing is real public yet, but I have heard very quiet discussions from a number of other public institutions of higher education that would like to get into the authorizing game. We'll know more probably in the next 3 months, but I expect that we'll see a significant increase there. Second, Westminster College would very much like to, and I can't remember if they're a college or university, so I'm sure they're, if I misspoke, someone should correct me, but Westminster would very much like to be an authorizer. There's a school, Salt Lake School for the Performing Arts, that would like to change their authorizer from the Salt Lake School District to Westminster. Westminster wants to do that, but Westminster is a private institution of higher education. And I think there's pretty general agreement. It's in one of Senator Fillmore's bills. I don't remember which one, 45 or 65. Maybe it's 55, I don't remember, but it would open up the opportunity to become an authorizer to 3 private institutions of higher education. And I say 3 because it's specific to who the accrediting agency is. And in this case, I think it's BYU, Ensign College, and Westminster. And I really only expect that Westminster will take advantage of that anytime in the near future. Maybe Chair Bowles can convince his colleagues that they want to. But yeah, there's very active interest on the part of SPA and Westminster. And I think that there's SLIC may end up playing a part in that as well. So I expect that is that's moving very, very quickly. In fact, I spoke with Senator Reby and Representative Briscoe, who are not normally friendly to charter school legislation, they both said, yeah, this sounds great. And if I can convince them, I think that getting the other 102 colleagues is pretty easy.
Thank you. Let me make sure Kim has some time as well, because there may be some that you'd like to share, Kim, in addition.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll try and be brief. Member Phillips did a great job going over most of the bills. I wanted to point out a couple of things. I spoke to Representative Pulsifer, the Vice Chair of EdApproach, who feels strongly, and they're going to add intent language, that part of that money, Senator Fillmore called it essentially a 20% increase in the WPU because of all the unrestricted funds. But they will add intent language that asks schools to give raises to classified employees. Everyone knows about raises for teachers, but often classified employees get lost in the shuffle. So I'm excited about that. And I think most of our schools should respond to that. Couple of things specific to, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, that I should have turned off my mic. I'm muttering to myself that I found online the funding this. Okay, sorry.
Just the two bills that UCN ran specifically, the administrative cost funding, I couldn't be more excited about that. I ran that bill originally 20 years ago and asked for $100 per student. It was called administrative cost funding. Then since then, it's been changed to small school based funding. But to get that raised from $100 to $150 has taken me a long time, because there's been a couple legislators that are very powerful that are no longer here. So I'm thrilled that we're up to 150, and I'm even more thrilled that Chair Moss and Cindy Davis are very supportive of this and want to move forward and put that in the WPU. So each charter school, depending on how many students they have, will get a specific number of WPUs. That way, that fund will raise each year as the WPU goes up, and we don't have to go and ask for it. The reporting requirements, you all know I've been working on that one also for years and years with Senator Henderson when we began this process. Representative Pulsifer is very interested in getting this moving forward. Her bill that's not yet numbered or even public yet does not have a lot in it. I feel like under Chair Huntsman, we've laid a lot of groundwork, but I feel like with Chair Moss, he is very excited to move some big rocks, as he calls it, some big pain points off of our desks of our administrators. So I look forward to next year's bill even more than this year's bill. And then just finally, on the school safety, I've spoken to several folks that love the idea of school safety and money going into school safety, but they question whether it should come to charter schools that lease their buildings. My argument is that those students deserve safety just as much as anybody else, even the schools in strip malls they bring up specifically. And I will keep my eye on that, but I think we could build vestibules, do lots of things to make those schools more safe, even though they're leased. The state doesn't technically own those buildings. It wouldn't take a lot of money to make those schools safer. So I'm gonna keep my eye on that as well. But Bryce and Cindy did a great job with the rest of it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And thank you for representing all of these schools too. All right, so here's my question. I did find it. I muttered to myself, sorry, Kim, muttering while you were speaking. So tell me, I don't know, and I know you'll know quickly, what Create Utah, it has Senator Fillmore's name next to it. I'm not sure what Create Utah is. Will you help me to know that?
Create Utah is an Adobe product. It's a statewide license. A lot of LEAs, maybe even, I mean, this would make it available to all of them. They've been available to all LEAs on one-time basis. This would be on an ongoing. So I think that number is what, $5 million? And Senator Fillmore was the sponsor of that
Even
request
less, I
for
think
the
it's showing
appropriation.
2, but it's, thank you. That helps
Yeah.
me to know what that is. So thank you. I wasn't sure. Any other questions anyone has? This is such a, thank you for spending those long hours, all of you, Royce, Kim, Cindy, at the legislature and speaking on behalf of schools and children, therefore, in our state and supporting them. Thank you so much. Thanks. All right, all. We're at a place of our in our agenda that we do have a need to go into. It says possible closed session. That's what the open public meeting law requires, that we say that it's a possible, and we really do need to take some time to go into into a closed session for investigative proceedings regarding allegations of criminal misconduct, which we learned today is one of the 7 reasons that we can go into closed meeting. So I need a motion to go to closed session.
I would like to move that we go into closed session for the purpose of discussing possible criminal misconduct.
Investigative proceedings regarding allegations of criminal misconduct. Yes.
Thank you.
And a second to that motion.
I'll second that.
And a second from Vice Chair Phillips. It's not debatable, but we just vote. All those in favor of going into close, say aye.
Take a roll call.
Oh, yes, we do have to take roll call. Thank you so much for that reminder. And Representative Cisneros.
Yes.
And Member Olson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Phillips.
Yes.
Member Bassett.
Yes.
Member Spiker.
Yes.
And Member Smith.
Yes.
All right, unanimously, we will go into closed session. If you'll just have a few minutes while we
Second, I will second that.
a second from Vice Chair Phillips.
Yes.
Member Olson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Phillips.
Yes.
Member Bassett.
Yes.
Member Spiker.
Yes.
Member Smith.
Yes. Everyone looks at me because this is my favorite motion. I know. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.